listening to the Prescribed Films Podcast Network, home to hundreds of hours of free podcast entertainment. The shows on this network all have a common goal, providing you with the best discussions about movies and other forms of entertainment media. The PFPN hopes to fill your earholes with audio joy. Visit our website with links to all the other amazing shows at www.thepfpn.com. Thanks for listening.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to All About Movies, the podcast talk show all about movies. I am your host, Evan, and I'm joined with frequent guest, Alix.
Hey, everyone.
We both have ourselves some film degrees, so we're going to talk about films.
Whether you like it or not.
I guess if they don't, they can just turn it off.
I guess that's true.
Makes sense. Today we'll be talking about the illustrious films of Wes Anderson.
Wesley Anderson.
Yeah, Wesley Anderson. First we'll go through just kind of some general discussions, and then we'll kind of go film by film through his filmography, just to kind of make sure we touch on a little bit of everything. But first, I'd like to maybe talk about a little bit of the kind of stuff he's known for. A big factor is the visual aesthetics to his films.
Oh, yeah.
Kind of the centered shots, the left to right tracking shots, the playing with colors, like the often pastels that's in several films, mostly Royal Tenenbaums and the Grand Budapest Hotel come to mind. But
Moonrise Kingdom has some of that as well.
Well, Moonrise Kingdom plays in its own right with kind of a yellowing, kind of old photograph style.
Yeah.
But definitely a play with color is something we can say is a frequent thing. All of this is helped by his usual cinematographer, Robert Yeoman, who has done everything that's live action of his, besides his original Bottle Rocket short.
Right.
I heard they even got together when Wes Anderson just hand-wrote him a letter asking if he would do the cinematography for the feature-length version of Bottle Rocket.
Hello, I am Wes. I have a good movie. Please film it.
I don't know why he's Russian to you. But
And left-handed. I don't. Not that you can see that. Yeah.
That he was left-handed and you're miming. But they got together and discussed movies they liked, found a mutual appreciation for the French New Wave.
I mean, who doesn't?
Yeah. And they just got together and decided that they'd keep working together ever since.
That's kind of a thing he tends to do. He kind of just latches on to people and he's like, cool, you're mine forever.
That's true. But moving back to the aesthetics a bit, how important is that visual nature to his filmmaking?
I think very important. It's kind of what has set him apart as a director from directors like Tarantino and, I mean, probably other people, but Tarantino's the only one I can think of right now.
The only other director.
Like, okay, no, but like they kind of came about at a similar time, and he's often compared to Tarantino just because they get a lot of like they're very contrasting directors. But he's the only one I can think of. It's what has set him apart, and it's what brings attention to his films, because of course the writing is great and very interesting and the characters are very memorable, but what is so unique is the attention he pays to every single thing that's on screen, not only like making sure important things are in the shot and that everything in the shot is important, but making sure it's all placed and like blocked in a way that gives it even more importance.
One of the big things that I think of when I think of Wes Anderson is the insert shot.
Yeah.
That he is wont to do, kind of the everyday Carrie scene where you see all the stuff that people just keep on them before they put them in their pockets or take them about throughout their day.
Yeah, I definitely think even though his stories are great, it'd be tough for him to have made the impact that he's made without his signature aesthetics. Because without those, these are just fun movies that have stories we can all relate to on some level, which is what good filmmaking is anyway. But he goes above and beyond that by giving us this very contained world. Like, he's even said the way he aestheticizes his films, it makes them feel like they're taking place in like a little miniature world.
We did see a nice quote by him at the miniatures exhibit in the Chicago Museum.
Oh my god, I forgot about that.
Yeah,
That's
he's
awesome.
really into miniatures too, which makes sense.
Yeah,
with
which makes sense
your
with
quote
that.
there.
Yeah.
So you'd say it's kind of not so much a style over substance, but a style in equal to substance.
Yeah,
kind of thing.
yeah, style.
Just as important.
Yeah, style to enrich the substance.
Okay, I can get behind that. In one of your last papers in film school that I got to read, you wrote about the music in his films and how it creates kind of an aural atmosphere. He does this with Randall Poster, his longtime music supervisor. Mm-hmm. Do you think this audio aesthetic is as important as his visual one?
I will say that's entirely what my paper was founded on. So yeah, definitely.
That it's as important
it's
as the...
just as important, yes. Because just as I said, his visual aesthetics make his movies go beyond just good filmmaking. That's what the music does as well. Without that thoughtfulness, we would just have, nice little, like, complimentary music to what's going on, and we'd have, like, maybe a fun, like, oldie rock song in here that maybe people have forgotten about, or we'd have, like, this fun indie song here, and it's like, oh, how cool and hip. But he's very tuned in to what pairs well with his films. Not like it's not just like making sure that the tone of the music is right. It's more making sure like the energy of the music fits with the energy of the film, or making sure that the story that the music has complements the story that his film has. One that comes to mind is Moonrise Kingdom, where he has that record of like children's introduction to classical music is essentially what it is. And we come back to this record time and time again, listening to instruments be introduced, an orchestral piece be broken down for, like, the enrichment of children. At the same time, we're watching these children kind of break down each other's personalities, each other's stories, and start to understand each other and understand how they function together as a group, kind of like how the orchestra functions as a group. So yeah, I think his thoughtfulness in how his films sound is equally as important and makes an equal impact in his films and how they have interacted with our current culture.
You've kind of touched a bit on how he would use a soundtrack style predominantly throughout his early to kind of middle films, but he's kind of moving away from that a little with his newer films being more scored. Alexander Desplat doing a lot of the newer films. Why do you think he's maybe moving away from the soundtrack style?
I think he's just tackling maybe not different things. He seems to like to tackle a lot of the same themes. I think he's starting to tackle things in different ways. He seems to be, in his latest work, creating more of an atmosphere for the audience. They feel more atmospheric. You know what I mean? Like, Grand Budapest has a very different feel from the Royal Tenenbaums. Mostly because of the story, but also because the music works in such a way to draw you in to the world of Grand Budapest, whereas it doesn't really do that in Royal Tenenbaums. It serves to kind of complement what's going on screen and give you further insight into what the characters are going through.
Something that I also just recently started thinking about was that a lot of his earlier films can be seen as, at least from what is out there about Wes Anderson and his life, maybe a little autobiographical.
Yes. Yeah.
And that perhaps the soundtrack style, being music that he listens to, might kind of reflect that a bit.
Be a nod to that, yeah.
Yeah, whereas like these later films such as Isle of Dogs and Grand Budapest Hotel, Fantastic Mr. Fox, you're definitely not getting Wes Anderson the movie. You're just getting Wes Anderson making this movie.
Wes Anderson creates a world.
Yeah, as opposed to, hey, I'm Wes Anderson.
Yeah.
This is me as a movie.
And I think we kind of, I think Moonrise Kingdom was a good in between, a good transition from his the first half of his career, where he's making not entirely autobiographical works, but more autobiographical works, and then transitioning into something that's a little bit more removed from him. Because, I mean, there's definitely parts of him in Moonrise Kingdom. It's like a lot of the concept is based on a play he and his brother were in when they were children, and that's a play that shows up in the film. But there's a little bit more of that, like, I don't know, like fairy tale quality to like an imagined world than there is in the Royal Tenenbaums, which very clearly just takes place in our world.
The Royal Tenenbaums and Rushmore being the most feeling autobiographical out of those for me.
Yes. Rushmore.
So we kind of touched on this a little bit already, but there definitely seems to be a collector nature with Wes Anderson, with not just the crew being his music supervisor and now his composer and his cinematographer, but also with the actors that he works with. Examples being occasional co-writer Owen Wilson, Jason Schwartzman, Adrian Brody, Willem Dafoe, a more recent addition, and most notably Bill Murray.
Bill Murray, yeah.
Showing up in, I think, everything since Rushmore, if I remember right. So why do you think that is, that he chooses to work with these specifically actors, but also the crew so much throughout his career?
I think it comes down to that sense of containment that we've already kind of talked about. I think if the group of people that you work on things with is contained, then your ideas become a little bit more contained. I think it's just a way of like putting himself in the right mindset, you know, instead of constantly having to meet like a new group of people and work with a totally fresh cast or a totally fresh crew. He has this group of people that he can rely on to set the right kind of tone for his films. I think it's another part of being so thoughtful about what goes into your films. There's obviously something in the thought process of like these crew members and cast members that he sees that he always wants to be in the worlds he creates.
I can agree with that, but also there seems to be, and maybe this kind of goes with his love of miniatures as well, but his want of control.
I was going to touch on
feeling
that.
very precise and definitely in its place, and maybe he feels when he's worked with these actors, he can more easily tell them what to
put
do.
them
and
in
they will
their
listen.
place. Yeah. I mean, as independent filmmakers ourselves, more out of necessity than anything, we tend to go back to people we've already worked with. But I think you and I can agree it's easier to go about the process of telling people what to do when you already know how to work with them. But yeah, in a less glowing light, I would agree that is something I've thought about a lot, something that didn't quite make it into my paper. Wes Anderson seems to like to play God a lot. And I think, well, like, I think that's very evident in the fact that he creates worlds. Each movie exists in its own little world, or its own little pocket of the world. And like you said, like he has this love of miniatures. He imitates that with his art, and he imitates that with the way he approaches his art. He approaches every film like he's setting up like sets of miniatures. He very much enjoys using that like creator position to play God. This isn't like me trying to psychoanalyze Wes Anderson. This isn't the podcast for that, but I think it's really interesting. I think it's an interesting thing to pick up about somebody, just from their work and how they approach their work.
And I think now would be a great time to start going through the filmography, and maybe one can even find kind of some thematic sense of control issues maybe throughout the topics of these films. His first film being Bottle Rocket. This is about Luke Wilson, who recently checked himself into a mental hospital in the film, just for some recoup. I think he referred to it as exhaustion.
Exhaustion, all right.
To his sister in the movie. Mm-hmm. To which she was like, "But why? You don't do anything. What are you exhausted from?"
It's too relatable.
Yeah, right. And then Owen Wilson, being Luke Wilson's friend in the movie, in real life his brother.
In real life, they're never brothers in these movies.
Yeah, I know, right? It's very strange. But being his friend in the movie, trying to start a criminal enterprise under a local crook in town who runs a lawn service business.
Yeah.
Throughout that, they end up doing their own job towards the beginning of the movie, end up on the run where Luke Wilson meets a nice hotel maid, and just things devolve from there into insanity. But there definitely is that sense of control with Owen Wilson where he shows on the bus ride back to where the town they live in from the mental hospital. He's just looking at his 5-year plan, his 10-year plan, his 20-year plan with Luke Wilson. And he's like, here's what we do step by step exactly for the next 20 years. Naturally, all the things that he tries to control don't work out so well.
Rails. Yeah.
And that's kind of the main conflict of the movie, as Luke Wilson just tries to help his friend out.
Yeah.
This movie, being his first feature-length film, is kind of lacking a lot of the visual aesthetics that we'll later see in the movie.
Yeah.
There's not so much the centered shots. You're not getting as many tracking shots. It just kind of is filmed like a movie.
Yeah.
Just like a regular movie.
Like a good, sensible movie.
Yeah. And you don't see him putting his visual notes on there. The color palette's just normal. And nothing too crazy about shot composition or anything. But overall, a pretty good film.
Yeah,
is
like
what I'll say.
not bad at all.
Especially for a first time feature. That's fantastic.
Yeah, it's great. And then we get to Rushmore.
Yeah, then we get to Rushmore. That's his second film. Which
shows a little bit more of the aesthetic and a lot of the aural aesthetics that he became known for.
That's true. And I think at least with the sounds in the movie, the songs used, a lot of that can be attributed to the clout that he got from the critical acclaim to Bottle Rocket, even though it did not financially do that
in
well
the box office. No.
Rushmore was able to get a lot of those songs, and a lot of the 60s British invasion band songs. I think is a big thing of note in several of his movies, but especially Rushmore. But visually, you also get a lot of the aesthetics that you'll come to expect later in his films. Not so much in terms of a color palette. It's still kept fairly normal, but you get more of the centered shots. The biggest Wes Anderson thing that I can think of in the movie is the montage of the yearbook things that the main character that Jason Schwartzman plays does in all the different clubs that he's in at school. You get individual scenes all set up very quickly. Definitely the kind of thing that's revisited throughout his career. This fast montage of scenes.
Right. I don't think we got into the plot of Rushmore.
No, we haven't yet.
No, so you mentioned all of the extracurriculars our main character is in. So if I remember correctly, essentially Jason Schwartzman is this like hyper involved high school student who just is like has to be the best at everything except grades, except like actual school. And the whole movie is kind of him battling like the expectations for him to be like much better academically, and him trying to be true to his more like ambitious, less academic nature.
Yeah, most of them being in the arts. A big thing that he's able to maintain doing throughout the film is constructing plays that are very grand, just comically grand in scale, where there's explosions in the background during some of them. And it's a little goofy, but
it's very goofy.
But good. There's also the other plot of the movie where he befriends Bill Murray as the father of one of, or I guess two of his classmates, because they're twins.
Yeah.
Who's just midlife crisising so hard. It's ridiculous. And he also falls for one of the teachers at the school, who teaches like the younger kids. And just things go off the rails as he tries to pursue that, tries to keep up his friendship with Bill Murray, who also becomes involved with the teacher. And it's just a big to-do. Everything just goes crazy.
It's a huge to-do.
Huge to-do.
In terms of Wes Anderson's autobiographical nature, this one seems very close to home.
Yeah, an artsy kid trying to do everything and just be the best and great at controlling everything in his life.
And then it all falls to shit. But it's all okay in the end. Yeah. Everything's okay in the end.
Yeah, which is nice. It's a nice thing about this movie.
It's a nice, hopeful film. A lot of his films kind of have that thing at the end. Like, yeah, everything like falls to shit pretty quickly, but everything's kind of okay in the end.
That's true. I'd agree with that. Another film that we also get next, co-written by Owen Wilson, just like Bottle Rocket.
First three, yeah. Rushmore was also co-written.
Rushmore was also? I didn't know that.
First three films co-written with Owen Wilson.
Oh, that's nice. But Royal Tenenbaums being the third film, about pretty much just a family where all the kids were geniuses at something growing up.
Yeah.
And then just didn't achieve much upon growing up. In part because of their absentee dad, but to blame it all on him seems like that would be...
a little unfair, yeah.
Yeah, a little unfair.
Yeah, I enjoy the hook of this movie, which is essentially estranged father pretends to be dying of cancer in order to get closer to his kids. Because it only gets worse from there. It only gets even crazier from there.
That's true. And this movie starts kind of more of the color palettes
that
we
does.
can get used to as well.
It does. With those beautiful tracksuits and the family of Russian tracksuits.
I heard that the tracksuits were oddly Ben Stiller's idea.
I think I remember that.
It's like, this, I feel my character would want to be ready, just always having on a tracksuit. Mm-hmm. Bill Murray comes back for this movie, and I heard he was a joy to work with in this film, even out of his own pocket funding some helicopter shots over the city.
Damn.
That he missed out on being able to get.
Damn.
Yeah.
Good on you, Bill Murray.
Meanwhile, I heard that star Gene Hackman, just very difficult to work with in this movie.
When you do the conversation, like, you're hot shit after that.
That's true. But that this movie was written with Gene Hackman in mind for that part.
Yeah, I mean, he fits it really well.
Yeah, he does a great job.
He plays the titular Royal Tenenbaum very well. Something I really like about this movie is it still feels very autobiographical, but it's an ensemble cast. And instead of it being like in Rushmore, where we can clearly tell who the Wes Anderson-esque character is, and like all of him is in it, we see like bits of autobiography in all of these characters, which I think is really nice, and I think that's a good way to approach an ensemble cast.
I think a part of Owen Wilson comes through this too with Owen Wilson outwardly being a fairly depressed guy in real life. And a lot of that coming through with some of the characters. And
with especially with Luke Wilson, his brother's character, where we have the shaving scene that devolves into not shaving.
Yeah, that's a very depressing,
very
but very
intense scene.
well done scene.
Yeah, definitely. I think that might be one of the most, if not just the most intense scene in a Wes Anderson movie that I've seen. And I feel like this film specifically tackles a lot more intense family politics than a lot of his other films get into.
I could mostly agree with that.
Yeah.
But if we move on through his films, we'll see that
it gets
that family politics comes up a lot.
It does. It definitely does.
Maybe shining a bit of a light again into some of the issues that Wes Anderson at least likes to look into, if not personally.
I mean,
has issue with.
He either is super interested in other people's daddy issues, or he's super interested in his own daddy issues. Because as we'll see with The Life Aquatic with Steve Zissou, it's very pervasive throughout his filmography.
That's true. Another thing that got touched on a bit in the film Rushmore is a nice love of the ocean. He bonds with the teacher about the love of the ocean and about Jacques Cousteau.
Jacques Cousteau.
And this film, The Life Aquatic with Steve Zissou, is kind of a pseudo-biographical film, a little bit about Jacques Cousteau, except if Jacques Cousteau was a crazy, schlubby Bill Murray type.
Traversing the ocean in search of revenge.
Yes.
Very, very Captain Ahab-like.
Yeah, it opens with Bill Murray kind of premiering the first half of a documentary about an elusive jaguar shark, and that the jaguar shark ate his longtime partner.
Friend.
Yeah, his
friend partner. Not
his business partner.
Well, and his business partner. I just wanted to...
Yes, not
to
his
say,
lover.
Wes Anderson is not tackling homosexuality in this film.
True. But anyway, the shark eats his business partner and friend. And he's trying to get enough funds together to make part 2 of the documentary, where he plans to hunt down and blow up this shark.
Where they revenge the shark.
And he finally gets the source of that money when he meets Owen Wilson, whose mother at one point had an affair with Bill Murray. So he thinks that he might be the son of Bill Murray's character. And they just have adventures at sea, where there's nice music.
I love
French
the music.
covers of David Bowie.
Portuguese covers of David Bowie.
You get the return of several Wes Anderson favorite actors, like Bill Murray and Angelica Houston. It introduces Willem Dafoe, who will show up in more films later, and Jeff Goldblum, who also will show up in more films later. And this movie, I enjoy this movie. Audiences, when it came out, didn't love this movie. It didn't make a lot of money.
It's understandable.
I heard a big part of that was that they gave him more funds than they usually do, because the producers were fans of his. And, if he had the money, he was going to spend it. And it's kind of a grander film in some ways. A lot of work with the props. You see a side cut out of a submarine. There's a lot of boats, which always cost money.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Well, this is where he starts dipping his toe into stop motion, is it not?
Yeah, a lot of the sea creatures look like they would be out of old Rankin Bass cartoons, like the
Rudolph.
like Rudolph being the big example there. And they just all swim about and very clearly aren't real.
Yeah,
but in a
not
very
like
whimsical
a trick.
way.
Yeah.
And it's very fun and very, very quaint.
It is, yeah. I wasn't expecting that going in. There were a couple things I wasn't expecting. One was Portuguese David Bowie, and the other was a stop motion fish.
Even the jaguar shark at the end being
yeah,
a
I don't know how I
creation.
felt about that. For those of you listening, I'm making a very conflicted face. But yeah, that was his first kind of dance with stop motion, which he would later get a little bit more into with Fantastic Mr. Fox and Isle of Dogs.
That's true.
But before we get there, even more films.
That's true. Before we get there, another film that's often ranked pretty low in his filmography, The Darjeeling Limited. This being about three brothers, Owen Wilson, Adrian Brody, and Jason Schwartzman, all getting together to travel across India, trying to bond, this being a year after their father's funeral. That's right, a return to daddy issues for Wes Anderson.
A return to abandonment.
They've also long time been abandoned by their mother in the film.
I mean, who hasn't,
who's played by Angelica Houston.
There we go.
Making another comeback.
Another comeback.
This is definitely lower on the list of Wes Anderson movies that I like.
Yeah.
But he does some fun work with trains. It's a lot of like semi-successful white people hanging out in India in a movie. And you're like, oh, this is fine.
Yeah.
And they go through adventures. It's a nice time, but overall, it's less noteworthy than I'd say a good majority of his films. And I have less to talk about for that reason.
Sure. Hey, man. I'm all for moving into Fantastic Mr. Fox.
That's true. Right before that, I'll say there is a tie-in short with The Darjeeling Limited.
Yeah.
Kind of a prequel, I guess, Hotel Chevalier, I think is how you would say it. It's just Jason Schwartzman and Natalie Portman in a hotel. Her being a fixation of his character throughout the film that we don't see in the actual Darjeeling Limited, but kind of gives a glimpse into the backstory of his character. Now we can talk Fantastic Mr. Fox. I'll say this is also one of my lesser films.
I would like to counter that just by saying, since this film's release in 2009, my current roommate has been obsessed with this film, has loved this film so much. She bought a poster for it online because she was super into it. And I think she's the only person in the world who feels this passionately about Fantastic Mr. Fox.
I know a lot of people like it. It's got interesting things going on. The
it's
stop
very
motion's very, very good. It's a very good-looking film.
It's a well animated film. The story, obviously, coming from Roald Dahl, like the story's not lacking.
Yeah, you've got a fox played by George Clooney, who's kind of settled down with his wife, played by Meryl Streep.
I want to say they were like former criminals, is their whole shtick.
Well, at the very least, George Clooney was a criminal who's kind of settled down. His wife's like, hey, you gotta quit with the stealing of farmers' goods. Like,
we're gonna have a baby.
Yeah.
We need to be a little more stable.
Quit stealing all the meat and all the eggs from the farmers. You gotta quit doing it. He's like, okay, but he gets restless. He goes back to his thieving ways. He's a sneaky fox.
Sneaky fox.
And, the movie just kind of deals with the fallout of that. There's also his son in the movie. Feels like he's not living up to his dad's expectations. Some more quintessential Wes Anderson daddy issues.
There we go.
And his nephew ends up staying with him for a bit, who's a lot closer to what Mr. Fox would want in a son. So that kind of creates its own problems there with that subplot. And it's just a weird, I'd say even quirkier than usual film.
Yeah.
That I just can't get into as much as some of his other films.
So, I really like the concept of this film. I like films that are animals versus humans. Just because it's the opposite way of how things are in real life, in which
Big Chicken Run fan.
You got me, man. When I was a kid, I bought my parents Chicken Run for their wedding anniversary, just so they'd be forced to watch it with me, because that would be the polite thing to do. And they hated me for it. No, I'm really into that. But, like, the concept is Roald Dolls. It's not Wes Anderson's. And so what I come to with this movie is I really hate how much they say cuss.
Yeah, since it's a kid's film and they don't swear, they just say cuss.
It's like the backbone of the humor for the whole film, and it gets old after like the first 5 minutes.
There's a small detail I noticed where there's even graffiti at some point in the movie.
Are you kidding me?
That says cuss, just in graffiti.
Are you cussing with me?
No.
Doesn't he call someone, like, a cuss? Like, he just gets pissed and he's like, you shut up, you cuss! And you're like, what the fuck? Like, it sounds way too aggressive, but it's so ridiculous, and you're not sure if you're supposed to be, like, laughing or uncomfortable. And you're just like, why is George Clooney here? And it's a mess. I love talking about it because it's so bizarre. It's such a bizarre, weird film. It's a very weird, like, adaptation for a Roald Dahl book. But I think all of them end up being pretty weird. Like James and the Giant Peach and Charlie and the Chocolate Factory and what have you. But this one is particularly strange.
That's true. His next film is going to be one that I liked a lot more.
This
is one of my favorites of his.
My personal favorite. It was the first... I guess I technically saw Fantastic Mr. Fox first, but it was the first, like, Wes Anderson film that I saw. It was my introduction to, like, Wes Anderson as a creator.
And this film being Moonrise Kingdom.
So beautiful.
Yeah, this film being about two kids who run away together. Just to live in the woods.
It's so cute.
And a search party is formed to find them.
It's so cute, and it's so deep, too. Because, like, it's definitely, like, a movie about daddy issues. Like, definitely. But where Rushmore and Royal Tenenbaums and Steve Zissou and kind of everything before has kind of dealt with, like, adults dealing with having daddy issues. This one is definitely just, like, kids dealing with adolescence in general. And the issues they have with their parents are just kind of part of that. And I really liked the way he tackled adolescence. It felt very genuine. I think in some things that have tried to do similar things, it feels a little exploitative. If anyone's a fan of Big Mouth, that is one example of exploring adolescence in a weird, exploitative, less genuine way. But this feels very genuine and very, like, very, like, I don't know, very, very loving, very caring.
Yeah, a word I like to attribute to this movie is it's just a very nice film.
It's a very nice film. It has some intense moments. Just, like, for the characters, it's intense. We're very sad for a lot of the things these two kids have to go through. One of them being an orphan. But it's just nice. It's delightful. It has a good ending. Also, Bruce Willis is there, which is great.
That is a weird person to be in a Wes Anderson movie.
Yeah, action stud Bruce Willis just coming in being the good old community sheriff. He's a great character. I think this is maybe the first out of the ones we've looked at here where that daddy issue thing comes up with this kid being an orphan, but we actually get, like, a surrogate father figure.
Yeah, there does end up being a nice resolution to it with Bruce Willis kind of stepping up and helping take care of this kid.
We have growth here, yeah.
Maybe Wes Anderson had reconciled some things about himself before this movie. Another thing that is the case through, I'd say, all of his movies, but is maybe extra on display in this film, is kind of the out-of-time nature.
Yes.
That you're never sure when any Wes Anderson movie takes place in. It doesn't feel like the present.
No.
But there's definitely anachronistic things that if it were the past, they wouldn't be there.
Yeah, yeah.
But this movie in particular, partially because it's framed with someone talking about the storm that happens at the climax of the film in a very documentarian kind of way. Mm-hmm. And also the visual nature, like we talked about at the beginning, there kind of being a yellow old photograph look to this film. This one definitely feels more than most like it takes place sometime in the past.
Well, it does. I think it's like established for a moment that it takes place in the 60s.
Is it? That's definitely when it feels like it takes place.
But it still retains that very, like, ambiguous quality, where it still feels like it could, despite reason, take place in the present. But it could also very believably take place in the last 10, 20, 30, 40 years. 50. Oh, God. That would have been like 50 years ago. Jesus. I think Grand Budapest, which I think we're up to talk to next, does a lot of those same things that Moonrise Kingdom does. Specifically that singular point I made about the surrogate father figure seems to be a big part of this movie. But also I think we're put into very specific time periods, but they still feel timeless.
The Grand Budapest Hotel being a film that is like 3 framing devices deep by the time you get to the core of the movie.
Good God.
By also several different aspect ratios referencing different times of the film in a very interesting way. You get full screen, you get widescreen, you get even more stretched out screen.
Even more stretched out screen.
That I'm blanking on the specific name for.
You didn't go to film school.
Ooh, you got me. But it's definitely a film that seems like it's trying to take place in the 30s or 40s for the bulk of the movie.
Yeah.
Which is the full screen section of the film.
Yeah. So, like, the whole thing of this is, like, this young woman has a book, and she goes to the grave of the author of that book.
And then it shows the author of the book.
Yes.
And then it shows the author of the book before he writes the book.
When he's visiting the Grand Budapest Hotel.
At this point, the Grand Budapest Hotel being kind of in a dilapidated nature. It's not in its heyday anymore. And he meets who we later know will be the main character, Zero. And he comes to befriend him, and Zero tells him his story.
And then we
go back... Which is the bulk of the movie.
Even further, yeah.
Yeah, Zero's childhood.
Zero running around with Ralph Fiennes.
Rafe Fiennes.
Rafe Fiennes, I'm sorry. It's spelled Ralph.
Yeah.
And I'm American, so it always comes out Ralph.
No, I don't blame you there.
Yeah. So we go from present day to 20 years in the past? 20, 30 years in the past to, like...
To even slightly
70,
further
80 years in the past.
Yeah.
And, man, this movie's beautiful.
It's a very well-shot film.
Gorgeous. I think this is where his aesthetics are definitely at their peak, which makes sense, as it's his most recent feature...
That's live action.
That's live action, yeah, was what I was going to cap that off with.
Yeah, coming out in 2014.
2014, yeah, damn. It's been a while. Yeah, his aesthetics, his visual aesthetics are at a peak here. He's gotten a little more comfortable with the score as soundtrack for his film. It's very atmospheric.
There being no just songs in the movie at all.
I think this was the first one, right? Where it's all score and there's no compilation aspect to it. Yeah. I should know. I wrote the paper. What am I asking you for? It's definitely a bit of a departure from what he's done before. It's a smaller cast, like a smaller main cast, than what he's been tackling in movies before. And it's a bit more of a period piece.
In a way, but also at the same time, it's not exactly how real life happened.
No,
there's
not at
this
all.
hotel, and at some point throughout the film, it gets overtaken by Nazis who aren't explicitly Nazis.
No, they're like fake Nazis.
Yeah, they have a different symbol than the swastika, but they're very much Nazis.
Very much. Oh yeah. There's no like getting around it.
Yeah, and this kid and the what do they call him? The concierge.
The concierge, yeah.
Yeah, of the hotel just end up on various misadventures. There's murder, there's art thieving. There's prison
There was
breaks.
violence, but there was also dancing.
Yeah. Just a very odd combination of things to happen
Right.
to the employees of a hotel.
Yeah, I appreciate this film a lot. It gets into those more intense topics from time to time, and it has like a bit higher stakes than I think some of his past films do.
But the characters all react to them like Wes Anderson characters would.
Yeah, he still handles them very delightfully, is the
Yeah.
thing of it. Which I think is what's great about his films, is no matter like how dark they get or like what places they go to, they're still very like feel-good films. They're framed in a way that like these dark, intense times of these characters' lives are just part of their lives, not the defining feature.
And I think it helps that we know that everything kind of turns out okay because Zero's there telling the story.
Yeah, oh yeah. Yeah, Grand Budapest Hotel, super great.
Yeah, maybe moving on to his newest
Most
film.
recent film, yeah.
Another stop-motion film. This one I like better than Fantastic Mr. Fox.
Oh yeah,
being Isle
that's
of Dogs.
fine. Yeah, Isle of Dogs is great.
Yeah, essentially this movie, there's a disease affecting the dogs of Japan. Mm-hmm. So all the dogs get quarantined to an island off the mainland.
Trash Island.
Yeah. And this boy, who is kind of the adopted son, kind of nephew of the mayor.
He's the nephew of the... I don't think mayor is the word, is it?
Yeah, just kind of the leader of this area of Japan.
Made-up town of Japan.
Yeah, Megasaki.
Megasaki, yeah. There we go.
This boy goes in a one-man airplane to Trash Island to find his dog. Mm-hmm. And it's just kind of about the adventures there. We know most of this film through the dog speaking, because the main boy speaks in Japanese, which is not subtitled, which I appreciate greatly.
Yeah, I thought that was a really good move.
We then get some characters on the mainland trying to help out this situation by freeing the dogs, which we get through a foreign exchange student played by Greta Gerwig, which enables us to hear some English to know what's going on without too much subtitling being involved.
Right.
Which I think is a good way to get that across. You don't have to deal with the issues of subtitling.
Mm-hmm. Well, and what the film seems to kind of recognize the issues with subtitling, and that there are issues with translation, which we kind of get from listening to the English translators tell us what's going on, when we could easily kind of figure it out from visual context, but we listen to their weird kind of mangled translation of the Japanese language.
Yeah, I think if this was a more confident film, what they probably would have preferred to do, Wes Anderson, what he probably would have preferred to do, would just have us hear the dogs as English.
Yeah.
And then have all this Japanese going on without any amount of subtitling.
Any amount of translation, yeah.
But it does get to the point in the story where you kind of have to know what's going on.
Yeah. The specifics are a little bit more important.
Yeah, and that's kind of what we end up with. But a very beautiful movie. Everyone loves dogs.
Very beautiful.
So that's a great part of it.
There you go. I love dogs.
I love dogs.
I love dogs. Oh my god, that's so crazy.
I learned that because Jeff Goldblum was doing an interview about the movie. He said, "Hey, just listen when I say I love dogs. It sounds like I'm saying I love dogs. That's crazy." He was very impressed with how that worked.
That's a really good description of like Jeff Goldblum's energy. I appreciate that. I'm trying to think of what the song is that comes up while is that I'm trying to think of the kid's name. It can't be what I think it is. It is Atari. I remembered thinking that was a stupid name just because everyone's gonna think of, like, the Atari game system. But when Atari and the dogs are, like, traversing Trash Island, there's that song that's playing in the background. And
I can't remember the name either, but it's the only piece of not score.
Yes, it's the only piece of not score. And it gives us that connection back to Wes Anderson's beginnings with what people like to call, like, the Crate Digger soundtrack, where it's like this one, like, kind of hit from a very unnoticed kind of underground group that stands apart from their other music because it's so palatable and it's so it can fit well into something without being, like, too odd and weird, whereas the rest of their music kind of is. And I thought that was an interesting choice in this movie to, after Grand Budapest being devoid of any kind of compilation soundtrack, bring in, like, that one song, which I wish I knew the name of. I'll think of it. I know I will, because it'll bother me if I don't. What is it?
I think it's in the trailer for the film.
It is in the trailer,
with
yeah.
Heavy drumming, right?
Definitely, yeah. Oh my god. I Won't Hurt You by the West Coast pop art experimental band, which, like, there's no way I remembered that because there are too many words in that. I looked it up. Yeah, such a good song, and it's so fitting for the moment, just with the title. Like, it's gonna work for the moment with these dogs helping this kid find his dog, and everyone's, like, banding together and working as a group.
I was glad also to finally see I know there's only two, but to see a stop-motion Wes Anderson film that I liked quite a bit.
Yes, yeah.
Since I didn't like
you didn't like
Mr. Fox that
Steve
much.
Zissou either. And
I liked Steve Zissou.
Well, you didn't... all right.
I think audiences didn't, but I liked
okay.
it too.
All right. I'll let you have that. That's fine.
But
I'll let you have opinions. That's okay.
Yeah. You definitely... When you're dealing with stop-motion, though, it kind of, I think, illustrates just how much Wes Anderson has to love his little bits of control, because
yes, it
there's
all
nothing
comes
in there.
back to control. Every single movement has to be planned out. Every single movement has to go exactly according to plan. And that's his fucking shit, man. That's his bread and butter. I think if he could, like, stop motion people, he would. I think if he could get away with it, he definitely would. He'd make some weird, like, live action stop motion where just human bodies are being moved at, like, a fraction of an inch for no reason other than Wes Anderson's like, look how aesthetic it is. It's so great. This isn't how I talk. I'm from Texas. But yeah, wow. I love dogs.
Another interesting thing about that is that it finally shows more explicitly something that he's said in interviews, where one of his greatest influences are the old Charlie Brown cartoons. And you kind of get that more explicitly than just kind of the weird vibe.
Yeah.
That when you hear it, you're like, that makes sense.
That makes sense. Charlie Brown also has that delightful but painful view of adolescence. All right,
yeah.
But this movie's like, look at this kid and the dogs. Look at them. Look at these dogs and this kid. That's what I got for Charlie Brown's influence on
go.
Isle of Dogs.
But finally, talking about a movie that hasn't even come out yet.
I was wondering if you'd mention this. Yeah.
There's The French Dispatch, which is currently being filmed. Looks exciting. It happens sometime after World War II in France.
Period piece. Here we
that's,
go.
Yeah, that's all that's really known about it.
Hey, that's all right, man.
A lot of the cast is already announced.
God damn Timothée Chalamet.
Timothée Chalamet coming in to steal our hearts once again.
He's the perfect aesthetic, though. He's like his cocaine prettiness definitely is gonna work with Wes Anderson's aesthetic.
But you also have Saoirse Ronan coming back.
Coming back from Grand Budapest
Hotel. You've got Kate Winslet, Leah Seydoux, who's coming in from being in a Wes Anderson made commercial.
Oh,
for Prada.
yeah. That was
Griffin
weird.
Dunn, Benicio del Toro, Willem Dafoe coming back, Tilda
Swinton
coming back,
yeah.
Bill Murray, Adrian Brody, Frances McDormand, Owen Wilson,
Yeah,
Henry
Frances
Winkler.
McDormand was in, was she
She was
in
in Isle of Dogs.
Isle of Dogs? Was she in Moonrise Kingdom, or
She
am I
was.
imagining? She was. She definitely was.
And then rounding out the people who are usually in a Wes Anderson movie, Jason Schwartzman also coming
Jason
in.
Schwartzman. None of these people, well, one of these people being French, at least. I'm assuming Leah
Seydoux.
Seydoux
she's
might be.
French.
One French person. Big French movie.
You know, I'm sure it's about a bunch of Americans in France.
I'm sure. I guess Timothée Chalamet has like a super French name, so maybe that's gonna come.
I don't know if he's French or not.
How?
It's hard to say.
What kind of accent do you think Saoirse Ronan's gonna have in this film? Because she had a pretty good American accent in Lady Bird. I can't quite remember what she did in Grand Budapest.
Wes Anderson just let her be Irish.
Did he?
Yeah, so
Nice.
he might stick with that again.
Nice. I really wish he was making her do a French accent. I would love to watch French accented words come out of Saoirse Ronan's mouth, because it seems like it'd be the most uncomfortable thing possible.
It's hard to say. But I'm looking forward to this film.
Definitely.
I'm glad to finally see another live-action movie coming from him, because it feels like it's been a long time.
It has been a long time. That was like 2014. That was 5 years ago now.
Ugh. Well, glad to see it'll theoretically be coming out in 2020. That's what IMDb tells me.
There we go.
So looking forward to that.
Definitely.
I think that's all we have for Wes Anderson.
I think that's it. Sorry if you hear this, man. Sorry we tore into your childhood.
He knows what he's about.
He knows. He's self-aware enough, I think. And probably not going to come across this.
I do doubt that he'll, unless he's just Googling himself and podcasts to see what people are saying.
Yeah, and it's just
about
like,
it.
all about movies. Wes Anderson. He's like, ooh, I'm feeling special today. I want to hear people love me. And we're just like, look at this guy's daddy issues hat.
There's a lot of love. There's a lot of love coming out.
There is a lot of love. Yeah, as much as I'm like, all your films are about daddy issues, I'm like, aw, all your films are about daddy issues, but they're all equally special. That's really great. That sounded more patronizing than I meant. I apologize to everyone.
It happens.
Especially on this podcast. But cool. Awesome. This has been great.
Yeah, thanks for being on the show.
Always, yeah.
Audience, thank you guys for listening. If you want to check us out on social media, you can check us out on Facebook, on Instagram, under All About Movies Pod. You can check us out on iTunes, on Spotify, on Podbean, just all kinds of places. Might make a Twitter for this at some point.
Ooh.
I don't know how Twitter
I hear
works.
Twitter is garbage, is what I hear.
It's all garbage.
It's all
man.
garbage, but I think Twitter is the most garbage.
But you know what you, the audience, should do? Check us out on that garbage.
Definitely check us out on that garbage.
Anyway, until next time, everybody.